Hi, this is Tom, and in this episode we're going to solve the quadratic equation of 2x squared plus 8 times x minus 1 is equal to 5x plus 1. Before we can do anything, we first need to remove the parentheses, and then it'll make it so that all terms we can combine like terms. So first, we're going to distribute. First, make a note of that. First, distribute. So when I do that, I'm going to distribute the 8 through the parentheses. So 8 times x, and then the 8 times negative 1. This gives me 2x squared plus 8x minus 8 equals 5x plus 1. Now, in order to solve by factoring, the equation must be set to 0. Now, you can move all the terms to the left-hand side of the equation, or you could move all of the terms to the right-hand side of the equation. To remove having to deal with a negative, I think the best strategy is to keep the leading coefficient positive. And the leading coefficient is the number with the variable with the highest degree. That's the entire is the leading term. So what we're worried about here is we're worried about the 2x squared. The problem can still be solved if that's negative, but it's a little cleaner if we keep it positive. So because of that, we're going to move all terms to the left-hand side of the equation. I'm going to abbreviate LH, left-hand side of the equal sign. Okay, let's do this. So in order to do that, first let's move we'll move the 1. So I'm going to subtract a 1 from the right-hand side, and we'll also subtract a 1 from the left-hand side. So if I combine my like terms, I now have 2x squared plus 8x minus 9 is equal to 5x. The 1's turn to 0, and then we don't have to worry about the 0. Now, we want to move the 5x to the left-hand side. This is done by subtracting the 5x from the right-hand side, and then doing the exact same thing on the other side. So I'm going to line it up with its like term, the 8x. Put a line under all of this, and then bring down my columns. This gives me 2x squared plus 3x minus 9 is equal to 0. Now we can factor the left-hand side of the equation. So that's what we're going to do next. Factor left-hand side. Now notice that we didn't factor earlier in the problem. Do not factor until one side of the equation is equal to 0. So in order to factor this, we're going to go through the process we've done before. In the top spot here, I'm going to go a times c. And in this case, the a is the 2, and the c is the negative 9. This is going to give me a negative 18. In the bottom, place the b value, which in this case is the coefficient on the x. That's 3. So now I need two numbers that multiply to negative 18 and sum to positive 3. And after some thought, I think it's 6 and negative 3. So what I'm going to do now is use the 6 and negative 3 to rewrite the 3x. So I'll rewrite it as 2x squared plus 6x minus 3x minus 9 equals 0. So now notice here we have a greatest common factor in the first group of 2x. That's our greatest common factor in the group, not the whole equation. Now remember that this little sign should always come down with the problem. In other words, my GCF needs to include that sign, so that makes my greatest common factor for this second group a negative 3. Oops, I only need one of those negatives, so let me rewrite that. So now I have 2x times x plus 3. I'm going to include my minus sign. Again, it comes down with the problem. Minus 3. That's going to leave me with an x plus 3. Notice that it changes the sign on the last term. And you can always verify that you factored correctly if you distribute the parentheses and you return to where you began. And if you go negative 3 times x, that takes you to negative 3x. Negative 3 times positive 3, negative 9. So it looks like we've done this correct so far. But now notice that I have a new greatest common factor. In this case, it's the piece x plus 3, or I should say the binomial, sorry. So the x plus 3, that's our new greatest common factor. We take that out and we're left with a 2x minus 3. Again, the problem still equals 0. So let's bring this we'll go down one more line. Now we set each factor to 0 and solve for x. And solve. Now if it was y, then I would have written y, but we solve for the appropriate variable, which in this case we have x. Now my factors are actually binomials. They're linear binomials. Factors, one of my factors, we can see over here, is the x plus 3, the entire piece. The other factor is 2x minus 3. Those whole pieces by themselves are factors. So, coming over here, bring this around. I have one of my factors. I set each factor to 0. I go x plus 3 equals 0, or 2x minus 3 equals 0. Now, solving for x, I subtract 3 from both sides. So one of my solutions is x equals negative 3. My other one, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Now I have 2x equals 3. Divide both sides by 2. And I have x equals 3 halves. Then you can always check to make sure that your solution is correct by entering both of your solutions into the original equation, and it should make the equation true. So I'm pretty comfortable with our solutions, so I'm going to write these down. Negative 3 and 3 halves. Those are my solutions. But for the sake of illustration, let's just check and make sure that we did this correct. So let's pick the fraction. Fractions seem to be a bit of a struggle. So check x equals 3 halves is a solution. Now, if you remember, the problem was then 2 times 3 halves squared plus 8 times 3 halves minus 1. We want to see if that's equal to 5 times 3 halves plus 1. I'm going to multiply these out, so I have 2 times 3 halves squared is 9/4 plus, this is going to give me an 8 times, if I take 3 halves and I subtract 1, remember that 1 is 2 over 2. So 3 minus 2 is 1, so this becomes 1/2. And I want to see if that's equal to 5 times 3 halves, that's 15 halves plus 1. Simplify, I can reduce the 2 and the 4. So now I have the problem of 9 halves plus, I can see, I'm going to just multiply the 8 times the 1/2 directly, so I have 8 halves equals 15 over 2. And remember that 1 is the same as 2 over 2. So in other words, I have that 17 halves is equal to 17 halves. Since we ended with a true statement, we know that x equals 3 halves is a solution to the equation. And, as you should try, check to make sure that x equals -3 is also a solution. Thank you for watching how to solve a quadratic equation by factoring.